Hello and welcome. I'm Leigh-Ann Gerrans and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. President Trump says the long and painful nightmare is finally over for Israelis and Palestinians as Hamas hand over all 20 living hostages to Israel and Palestinian prisoners are released as part of the ceasefire deal. Meanwhile, Netanyahu tells Trump he's committed to peace on such a moving day. And world leaders gather at a Gaza peace summit in Egypt to discuss ending the war. President Trump has said the long and painful nightmare is finally over for Israelis and Palestinians during a speech to Israel's parliament. The president was greeted with cheers as he spoke in the Knesset on a historic day that saw Hamas hand over all 20 living hostages to Israel and Palestinian prisoners also released as part of the ceasefire deal in Gaza. Here's some more of what President Trump had to say.
Generations from now, this will be remembered as the moment that everything began to change, and change very much for the better. Like the USA right now, it will be the golden age of Israel and the golden age of the Middle East. It's going to work together. It is a good feeling. Isn't that nice to say? You know, I just said the hostage. First time I said the hostages are back. It feels so good to say it. No, and my personality actually is all about stopping wars, and it seems to work. It seems to work. But now at last, not only for Israelis, but also for Palestinians and for many others, the long and painful nightmare is finally over. And as the dust settles, the smoke fades, the debris is removed, and the ashes cleaned from the air, the day that breaks on a region transformed and a beautiful and much brighter future appears suddenly within your reach. This is now a very exciting time for Israel and for the entire Middle East, because all across the Middle East, the forces of chaos, terror, and ruin that have plagued the region for decades now stand weakened, isolated, and totally defeated.
For more on this, I'm joined by Middle East correspondent and author Yotam Confino. Yotam, great to have you on the show. So all the living hostages are home after being handed over by Hamas after nearly 2 years in captivity. What does this emotional moment mean for the whole of Israel? We know we spoke to you last week and you were in Hostages Square.
Well, it means that the nation can begin healing. The images that we're seeing right now of mothers and fathers and sons and daughters being reunited is both heartwarming and heartbreaking, because these people have been living through hell for 2 years straight. But they're finally able to put this chapter behind them and to look forward. And the entire nation of Israel is ready to do that. And I believe so are the Palestinians. I believe the Palestinians are also fed up with the war and with the horror that they have been experiencing for 2 years straight. Of course, we cannot forget to mention the fact that there are still dead hostages inside Gaza. According to the deal, all 28 dead hostages, the bodies of the hostages, were supposed to be released today as well. But only 4 have been given to Israel in the past hour. And this is, of course, something that's greatly frustrating for some of those families of the hostages that are not yet able to close this chapter, that aren't able to mourn properly and to bury their loved ones. So they're calling on the Israeli government and on the Israeli nation to not forget them, because yes, the living hostages were, I would say, arguably more important as they were still alive, but you should not underestimate how important it is for the families of those who are still in there to get closure, to bring back their bodies and to give them a proper burial.
And also earlier, President Trump has told the Knesset this is the historic dawn of a new Middle East. But it's important to remember, Yotam, we are in the early stages of this ceasefire. It's a real long way to go, isn't it?
It really is. First of all, I was at the Knesset today, and it was, I was in the atmosphere was buzzing. And I spoke to a few ministers, and they all said the same when I started pressing them on questions about the next phase. What about Hamas that are still, walking around in the streets of Gaza, killing people? They said, listen, today is about the release of the hostages. It's about Donald Trump coming here, making a historic speech. They're taking it day by day right now, because I think a lot of people know that there are huge challenges waiting for everyone involved in all of this. And the most crucial question is, of course, how to get Hamas to disarm. I believe that that's what they're discussing today in Sharm el-Sheikh when all of these leaders are gathered. It's a crucial question that has only been really explained or gotten into vaguely until now.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of the Hamas committee close to the negotiations did say over the weekend, it stressed Hamas remains a fundamental part of the Palestinian fabric. So like you said, Yotam, really important discussions to be had. But let's talk about Donald Trump, because look, it was a lightning visit to Israel. He didn't stay long in Israel. We saw him jump straight on a plane, go to Sharm el-Sheikh. What will be the focus of the swiftly organized Gaza summit in Egypt? We've seen all the world leaders go there, except Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yes, Netanyahu was invited last minute. I don't understand why he wasn't invited to begin with, frankly. He's one of the key leaders in this whole peacemaking process. Nevertheless, he was invited relatively last minute. He declined. He said it had to do with the proximity to the Jewish holiday which is currently started, Simchat Torah. I don't really buy that explanation. I believe it had more to do with the fact that he didn't want to be seen next to Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian president, whom he loathes and whom he doesn't want to have any role to play whatsoever in Gaza. It would hurt him in the eyes of all of his voters if he met with him. But let's just talk about what's at stake here at the Sharm el-Sheikh meeting. It's a twofold meeting, I would say. First, they need to figure out how to reconstruct Gaza. That's not such an issue, really, because there are so many countries willing to send billions and billions of dollars and pounds and whatever, euros to Gaza. That is just a logistical issue that will be resolved. But the more pressing question, like I said, how do you disarm Hamas? Hamas is not voluntarily going to throw their Kalashnikovs out the window. They will only do that if they're met with a stronger force. And which countries are going to send their soldiers or their police forces into Gaza? Everyone's kind of looking at each other, waiting for someone to take the lead here. The United States, as far as I'm concerned, will not be sending soldiers into Gaza. But who else will be doing that? That is the question they need to answer, because Israel has been doing the dirty work for them. They have destroyed Hamas mostly across Gaza at huge costs for Palestinians, for Israelis, for everyone involved. Now it's up to them to finish a job, so to say, to go in there and make sure that Hamas is not armed.
And let's talk a little bit about Netanyahu. He also addressed the Knesset earlier, saying he was committed to peace. What do you make of his popularity inside of Israel, especially after the booing from the crowd when Steve Witkoff mentioned his name in Hostages Square yesterday? And I really noticed that when I was watching that speech.
I was not surprised that they were booing at Netanyahu. You have to remember, half the country loathe him. And it's been like that for many, many years. Only Netanyahu has managed mostly to win each and every election. There was a brief moment he was out of office, but mainly he's been in office. So I think that he is, first of all, he feels like he's been vindicated. Today, sitting inside Knesset, having the most powerful man on earth, showering him with praise, telling everyone he's essentially the greatest leader Israel has ever had, telling him how great a job he's done, having standing applause, not so much from the opposition, but nevertheless, this was a moment of vindication for Netanyahu. And I believe that he will be able to use this, success, as we can call it, of having living hostages coming out, ending the war in Gaza, destroying most of Israel's enemies in the region. I believe that he will be able to translate that into more votes. I believe we're headed for elections, and I don't think we should count Netanyahu out, even though I was one of the people that after October the 7th said, there's no way he's going to survive this. But we are here 2 years later. He's still in power, and I believe he's got a good chance of staying in power, actually.
Yotam Confino, you always make very accurate predictions, so I will hold you to that one. But thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Leigh-Ann.
For more on this, I'm joined from Copenhagen by Palestinian ambassador to Denmark, Manuel Hassassian. Manuel, it's great to have you back on the show with me. Thank you for your time today. The release of Pleasure. The release of Palestinian prisoners held in Israeli jails has begun after Hamas freed the captives. How big of a moment is this for the Palestinian people?
Yeah, it has been a joyous moment because, we're talking about 2,000 prisoners who have been released, and the families, of the 2,000 are very happy to see their loved ones coming out of prison. But let's not forget that 1,700 of those were collected during the October 7th from Gaza. And then we have almost 300 a melange of several prisoners from different factions who have been also released. And of course, with some of them that had life sentences. But the sticky issue is that Hamas wanted, Marwan Barghouthi, Ahmad Saadat, Hassan Salami, these three who have been sentenced for life imprisonment to be part and parcel of the prisoners. But unfortunately, of course, the right-wing fascist government, have told Netanyahu if he releases them, then they will withdraw from the government, and then Netanyahu will be in a very critical position. So far, as far as those prisoners, we have to wait maybe for a different moment when the dust settles down to see if they will respond, to the release of the three prisoners. But in general, yes, it is a joyful event for them. The most important is the stoppage of the war, and that is the #1 priority for the Gazans. And they started breathing in a sense that no bombing, no shelling, no killing, and what have you. And it is for them the dawn of a new era. And that's why with jubilance, they have, received the Trump's 20-point plan, dealing first with the most sticky issues like the question of release of hostages and what have you. But the question is, what do we do with the remaining parts that are very sticky? I think, what is the enforcement that could lead to the success of this peace plan? We are afraid because there is no clear intention which security is going to take place, in Gaza. Is it the Americans, as President Trump mentioned in one of his interviews, that 200 American soldiers on boots will be in Gaza? Is there any participation by Arab countries to send their security forces, like in Egypt, Jordan, and what have you? So is there a chance that the Palestinian security forces will be also joining the International Peace Corps there? So these things are not clear, and there is no clearance as to the governance.
Manuel,
Tony Blair.
Oh, sorry. I just want to interrupt you there because I was speaking to Yotam Confino earlier, and one thing he did say to me, and you talking about these sticky parts of the deal, the phase 2, the parts still to come, and we know President Trump is now in Egypt for the Gaza summit. Do you think Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, he's in attendance, do you think he will speak to Donald Trump about the disarming of Hamas, about who will protect Gaza? And do you think he'll also speak to Donald Trump about future governance and Palestinian self-determination to get some more clarity on this 20-point peace proposal?
Well, absolutely. When President Abbas accepted the invitation, the last minute they invited him through President of Egypt, He went there, of course, with many questions, that he has to ask the president. The future of Gaza is totally tied to the future of the Palestinian Authority, because the Palestinian Authority that represents the PLO is the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinians. And Gaza and the West Bank and East Jerusalem has always been, one entity, one geographic contiguity, which will be 22% of historic Palestine, where the two-state solution has been shouldered for so many years by the international community. So he goes there with the international legitimacy behind him, with UN resolutions behind him. He will ask President Trump or his aides or whatever. I mean, I'm not sure whether President Trump will talk to him or not. I don't have the information, but he is there with a clear message. Who is going to govern? Who is going to take care of security? Who is, whether Hamas is going to demilitarize basically Gaza by the submission of weapons by Hamas, to whom the weapons are going to be submitted. Is it to the PLO? Is it to the International Keeping Force? Is it to the United States or to Israel? These sticky issues are not really very clear in this. That's why I say the second and third phases are going to be very critical and very complex and complicated.
Manuel, sorry,
Yes.
we're just running out of time. I just wanted to get your thoughts on one more question quickly, if I can. We are hearing of reports of serious gun battles inside Gaza involving Hamas and rival military groups. Is there a danger of a massive power vacuum inside Gaza now, and that could be filled with violence?
Well, in every situation, when the dust settles, there is an interim time where we call it interregnum, where chaos rules supreme. And yes, there are some clashes between Hamas and those whom they declare that they are outside the law, they are gangs and what have you. And I'm sure that Hamas eventually is going to control these groups and to flex muscles that they are still controlling Gaza, and they are a power to reckon with for future arrangements for Hamas in the Gaza plan.
Manuel Hassassian, it's always great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome, ma'am.
Now, as Palestinian prisoners were released, the remaining 20 living Israeli hostages were also released by Hamas. Here's the moment some of those hostages were indeed reunited with their families.
My heart is peace now that I can see his mother and his father having him. So I'm really happy for them that they can be together, and I can see how pain, 24 months of pain that they didn't know if he will come back.
For more on this, I'm joined by former head of the Counter-Terrorism Bureau and former military attaché at the Israeli Embassy in the United States, Brigadier General Nitzan Nuriel. Thank you so much for your time this evening, Brigadier General. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. It's been a very busy...
Thanks for having me.
A pleasure. It's been a very busy day today. Lots happening, but all of the living hostages are now been handed over by Hamas. What does this moment mean for the people of Israel? And we just saw those very emotional scenes a little bit earlier.
Yes, indeed. Having all the hostages live back in Israel, it's a very happy day. And yet we still have 24 more hostages under the Hamas control. They know about many of them, but there are few that they, at that stage, don't know where are they. And this is still an open issue for us.
And let's talk a little bit more about that, because Israel is accusing Hamas of violating the deal over the return of the dead hostages. President Donald Trump was actually asked about this, and he said he thinks they will find them. The big question is, will Israel renew its attack on Gaza if these bodies are not returned in the time frame given?
I believe that in order to understand under which condition Israel may go back into not a full war, but a military pressure on Hamas, you need more reasons than just not have those hostages back to Israel. There is a mechanism by the international players. So they will get the information and they will get the authorization to get into Gaza. And based on the intelligence we have and based on other sources, we'll try to look after those who are not returned by Hamas. So I don't think that by the next few days, we will see Israeli actions, military actions against Hamas. It will take a few more weeks before we will take a decision if to keep kind of military pressure on Hamas in case they violate the agreement, not only by the hostages, but by other means, up to launch rockets toward the state of Israel or trying to rebuild themselves from the military point of view.
And also, what do you make of the reports of clashes erupting between Hamas forces and armed clan members in Gaza City? Do you think that there's a power vacuum in Gaza now? And how much of a threat is this to Israel's future?
The bottom line is that chaos in Gaza is not good for us. Even though they are fighting among themselves, when there is a chaos, it's not good for us. And yes, there is a vacuum right now in Gaza. We will see more and more families, Hamulas, trying to take responsibility into their own people. Arm, rifle, and so far and so on exist all over Gaza, so it's easy to get those type of ammunitions. And yes, I believe that by the next few weeks, we will see clashes in Gaza among all the players. Therefore, having the first peacekeeping forces enter Gaza in order to take their responsibility, it's crucial.
And President Trump did give a speech in the Knesset a little bit earlier, suggesting Benjamin Netanyahu should get a pardon after being indicted on charges of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. Do you think Benjamin Netanyahu should get a pardon? Is this a possibility? Because last night, when Steve Witkoff made a speech in Hostages Square, Netanyahu's name was booed. He's deeply unpopular among some of Israel.
President Trump does not know the Israeli law. Upon the Israeli law, if someone was to get a free ticket from the let's say, from the system, he needs to admit that he did things that are not acceptable against the law. And at that stage, I cannot see Netanyahu admit that he made mistakes.
And just one final question. Do you think that the ceasefire will hold and we'll see the second phase of it completed successfully? Or do you think there's still far too many sticky issues that need to be ironed out in Egypt and in different places?
There are many sticky issues, mainly because President Trump put on the table points. It is not a plan. It is not plan broke into steps or a schedule. So now we have to have a workshop. We have to have a working group that all together try to finalize all those small details. And it will take, I believe, few months before we can see any dramatic progress in Gaza. And therefore, this is a very sensitive period of time.
Cautious optimism. Nitzan, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry has expressed concern today over clashes between Pakistan and Afghanistan and has asked both nations to protect Chinese nationals and investments in the region. This comes after dozens of fighters were killed in clashes over the weekend, which had also caused the borders to shut. On Sunday, Kabul said that it stopped its attacks at the request of Qatar and also Saudi Arabia. Camille Nedelek reports.
In limbo, hundreds of Afghan refugees were left stranded at the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan.
We arrived here in the morning and the bombing started. What kind of Islam is this? We're trapped with no money, no way to leave.
We're stranded here because of the war. People say there's fighting at the border. Children, women, and the elderly here with us are sick. There's no food or water.
Trade, as well as transit, was forced to a standstill. The Shaman crossing shut after fighting broke out between Afghan and Pakistani troops. Dozens of people were killed in recent days. The worst fighting between the two countries since the Taliban came to power in Afghanistan. The Chinese Foreign Ministry on Monday requested that both sides ensure Chinese personnel and projects aren't caught in the crossfire and urged de-escalation.
China sincerely hopes both countries will keep the bigger picture in mind, exercise restraint, and resolve their respective concerns through dialogue and consultation.
Pakistan periodically carries out airstrikes in Afghanistan, accusing Kabul of harboring Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan fighters, who have repeatedly carried out attacks on Pakistani soil. 2025 is on track to be Pakistan's deadliest year in a decade for terror-related deaths. Camille Nedelek, Al Arabiya English.
Now back to our top story, and President Trump has praised Egypt's President Sisi for playing an important role in the Gaza deal. The two leaders appeared together at a press conference ahead of an international summit on the agreement. For more on this, I'm joined by international negotiator Nomi Bar Yaacov. Nomi, great to have you back on the show today. Thank you so much for joining me. It has been an extremely busy day today. President Donald Trump has arrived in Sharm el-Sheikh. We saw him in Israel a little bit earlier. The Egyptians have played a key role in the ceasefire deal, haven't they?
Absolutely. I mean, the Egyptians have been pivotal right from the start. They're not only playing a pivotal role in the ceasefire, they're playing a pivotal role in the implementation of every stage. They're training the Palestinian police force in Egypt, over 10,000 police officers. They have been one of the key mediators alongside Qatar and the US right from the beginning, from the 7th of October 2023. So yes, I would say that the head of security, the Egyptian head of security, has been absolutely pivotal. They did change halfway through, but both of them have been extremely instrumental throughout this period, including all the ceasefires and especially at this in this ceasefire too.
So we saw President Trump in Israel addressing the Knesset, saying the skies are calm and guns are silent. What will the history books say about this very moment? Do we finally have peace in the Middle East?
I think we're quite a long way away from peace, but what we have is a plan that is a very broad plan. It is a framework rather than a detailed peace agreement. Peace agreements tend to be hundreds of pages and extremely detailed, and the devil is always in the detail. That said, achieving a ceasefire at this given moment in time and achieving an agreement on a framework is a huge, huge accomplishment. accomplishment, and it should not be taken lightly. Whether it will be implemented or not depends on numerous factors, including goodwill and whether the president of the US, Donald Trump, will continue to exercise the leverage that he has over Prime Minister Netanyahu. That really is the key factor. And of course, Turkey, who joined the mediation efforts recently and were extremely instrumental in getting us this particular deal, whether Turkey and Egypt and Qatar will continue to exercise their leverage over Hamas. I'm sure they will. So really, as I see it, the main issue is to ensure that all parties exercise the leverage that they have over Israel and Hamas respectively.
And the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas is in attendance in Egypt. Nomi, will he be pushing for a future Palestinian state and the rebuilding of Gaza? How important is this summit for him? We saw him shaking hands with Donald Trump. Is this his moment to really get the best for his people?
Well, I think his days are numbered. I mean, not literally days, but it's a question of months. He has been in power for far too long. He hasn't served the Palestinian people well, and we're really looking at the next president and the next Palestinian government to carry this through. What he does need to do is urgently appoint a technocratic Palestinian government in order to have governance in Gaza, because what we've been seeing is Hamas returning to the street with full force, full-fledged, a show of arms, and there is quite a lot of violence already in the street. So it's not just Abbas, but you need to have the Palestinian police deployed. The one that I just mentioned is trained. You need to have a mandate, a very clear mandate for the stabilization force, the international stabilization force that is envisaged in the 20-point peace plan. And of course, the technocratic Palestinian government is absolutely key, because if there's no governance by the envisaged technocratic new Palestinian government in Gaza, then you will probably have violence, unfortunately, in the streets.
And also, let's just talk about Donald Trump, because he said all he does in his life is make deals. A little bit earlier, he said Iran would like to make a deal and would like help. How likely are we to see a deal with Iran?
Well, I think that's very, very interesting, because Iran originally was silent, which is also interesting. I mean, as opposed to sort of going bombastically against this deal. And then quietly there was a hint, and then beyond the hint, of approval. So whereas they're not signing on the document, they are kind of hanging in there in the shadows, and I think it is possible if everything works through. I don't think Iran wants to be the spoiler anymore. They have lost Hezbollah. They have virtually lost Hamas. When I say that they are in the streets, you're seeing young teens and 20-year-olds, the entire establishment of Hamas, so the entire Ezzedine al-Qassam, the military wing of Hamas, all its leadership has been eliminated. All targeted in Israeli military action, known as targeted assassinations. So I think really, I mean, there's 2 years of this has been going on. So I think Iran has sort of learned the lesson that they're not very much in favor with anyone at the moment. And yes, it is a possibility that we will see them slowly moving towards acceptance of this deal. They did sign on to the Arab reconstruction plan for Gaza, the Egyptian plan that was launched in January this year. And this particular Trump plan is not too different to that.
Nomi, so good to have you on the show. Thank you, as always.
My pleasure.
I'm now joined by John Cavalage, a senior editor for outcome modelling analysis at Issue Insight. John, great to have you on the show. So President Trump has just had a super busy day. He was in Israel, now he's landed in Sharm El-Sheikh. He's been giving a press conference with El-Sisi, shaking lots of diplomats' hands from all around the world. How momentous is this moment, and what can really be achieved here?
You framed it well. It's a moment. It's a moment in a series of moments. Some are more important than others, but there's still moments. The only definitiveness from today was the release of the hostages living and release of some bodies. But other than that, this is again part of President Trump's performative nature. And that's one of the reasons why the documents that have been signed, the documents that have been negotiated and discussed during these weeks are very light. As your previous guest said, it's not a treaty. It's not even an agreement. It's an outline. And that's because President Trump generally wants the moment or moments, but the details sort of push to later. He wants something he can sign. Today, he got something he can sign, and he got an opportunity to give a speech and give a speech that he likes to give. So for President Trump, a really good day.
So yes, and obviously a little bit earlier, just before you came on the show, leaders of Egypt, Qatar, Turkey and the US signed Gaza document that Trump says will spell out rules and regulations. But John, let's be honest, you know, the next stages are going to be more complicated and harder to implement. Do you think Donald Trump will keep the pressure on Israel in order to follow this through?
The question, because President Trump would look at today and go, what was my primary goal? Hostages. Did I do that? Yes. Am I really interested in a multi-year, multi-country plan to reconstitute Gaza, reconstruct it, construct it, deal with 2.3 million people? And then always hanging above it, Israel's refusal for the two-state solution. So all of that going into his process, I'm gonna guess that he's probably going to move a little distant, saying, you know, this is war number 9 or 8. I'm not sure how many he's solved now, but it's going to be number 8, number 9, and he'll move on, because where does he go soon? He goes to South Korea, Japan, and Malaysia for ASEAN and for APEC, and then a bilateral. In South Korea, he's supposed to meet President Xi of China. That's a really big deal, and that matters to U.S. taxpayers. It matters to U.S. voters, and particularly it matters to his Make America Great Again base.
So it's really interesting, because we know that Donald Trump today said in the Knesset it's 8 wars that he's managed to end, and he gave thanks to Steve Witkoff and actually Pete Hegseth in that. But John, we must remember something. This is a historic moment. Donald Trump managed to bring everybody to the table. The Middle East leaders, the Arab leaders, everyone seems to be there. So it is a moment, really, that Donald Trump should feel triumphant.
Yes, I'm not taking that away from him. I just don't think that it's helpful or productive or rational to extrapolate all of this to a conclusion, because there are an incredible number of unknowns. And Donald Rumsfeld, the former United States Defense Secretary, used to talk about known knowns, unknown unknowns, known unknowns, et cetera. We still have a long way to go with this, because let's just look at Gaza. Who is going to pay for the reconstruction? Now, the conventional wisdom is the old, if you break it, you own it. So you would reasonably think the same logic that is going for Ukraine and Russia, which is the world community is saying to Russia, you've done a lot of damage. We have $320 billion of your central bank reserves, and we're going to hold it until you pay reparations, or we're going to use that for reparations. You destroyed Ukraine, you're going to pay to repair it. But now in Gaza, what's so interesting is what is estimated to be maybe 50 billion, 100 billion. You know, we really don't know. But the discussion is never about Israel paying for what the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, did. Hamas didn't level Gaza. The citizens of Gaza didn't level Gaza. The IDF leveled Gaza. But President Trump is there talking about all the very rich nations sitting behind him and with him, and that as this is the Arab and the Muslim responsibility. And President Erdogan, who it's amazing how President Trump is just bear hugging him. And even we saw it today where before the group photo, as they were getting together, he reached over, grabbed President Erdogan, then mentioned President Erdogan to the Iraqi next to him. And so, you know, he may be getting set up, but President Erdogan a year ago at the UN General Assembly in New York, I asked him a question. I said, tell me, should Israel pay and will Israel pay? And he said, John, Israel should pay, but they won't. They won't pay a penny. We're going to pay, all of us. They won't pay anything. But recently he's come around the last week or so and he said, well, you know, nothing should be done until Israel pays $100 billion. So maybe there's some change there now an interesting dynamic that we didn't see, but we might have seen, which would have been fantastic, is President Trump got President Sisi of Egypt to invite Prime Minister Netanyahu to this gathering. Prime Minister Netanyahu officially said that because of Jewish holidays, he wouldn't travel. There's media reporting that President Erdogan in his plane said, over my dead body, is this guy going to be there? So I'm not coming if he's coming. Don't really know the veracity of all that, but it would have been terrific for Netanyahu to have been there. Now, he would have stolen some of the thunder, media-wise, but these leaders could have said to him in private, you need to step up on this. And it would have given them an opportunity to do that in a setting. But they may have not wanted to do it, and this gets into the Trump factor, because maybe they didn't want to risk upsetting Donald Trump. And that's always a risk for these guys. No one wants to be the one that he goes after.
Such complicated logistics when we think of these big summits like you just outlined there, John. But I just want to ask you before I do let you go, President Zelensky has hailed the extraordinary Gaza ceasefire as bringing hope that President Donald Trump could broker an end to the Russian invasion of his country. So we know Zelensky is possibly heading to Washington on Friday. Am I being optimistic, but do you think we could see another deal, John?
It's very, very tough. They're so different. In Gaza, you had Hamas in control of Gaza. Israel wants Hamas out of control of Gaza, but Israel doesn't necessarily want Gaza. It's controlling part of it. It plans to stay there for the foreseeable future. But in Russia's case, Russia wanted real estate. And Russia wants to keep real estate, even if they can't control the entire country. So it's a little bit of apples and oranges. Now, what President Zelensky is smart to do is to, rub the genie's ego. And so that's what he's going to do, saying, Mr. President, you're the only one that could do what you did. You got all those countries to rally around you, and you made this happen. Please, the 38 million Ukrainians want you to do the same thing with Russia. What can we do to help you? The problem that President Zelensky has is that he's now into year 4, and the real estate hasn't changed that much, dealing with a lot of elasticity theory on who has more leverage. But people are continuing to die. But it's a tiring war. And President Trump has now pushed it off on Europe. He's made it a European problem. And that makes President Zelensky's arguments a little more tough, because President Trump, now he has number 8 and number 9 would be great. Peace Prize he's looking at. But I also think that he's going to look for what can he really do something with? What can he win? What can he come away with a win? Russia, Ukraine, he's continually saying, I've tried. It's the tougher one. I thought it'd be the easier one. I think we're going to see him sort of pivot to what he can chalk up as a win.
John Cavalier, fascinating to get your insights and analysis. Thank you so much. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Of course, follow us on X, and we'll be back in a couple of hours with a W News Extra. Goodbye and thank you.